Welcome, everyone. We're going to be talking about hormones this evening. Is anyone here, you don't have to say if you don't want to, but if you're willing to admit, currently or formerly on hormone replacement therapy? Okay, so there's a lot of confusion about that. Historically, it was used for many, many years, and then in 2002, an updated um, review of the Women's Health Initiative, a major study of women, showed that there was a slightly increased risk of heart disease and breast cancer for women that were taking standard hormone replacement therapy. And that freaked out everyone. And millions of women stopped taking hormone replacement therapy, and millions of doctors stopped prescribing it. They were even worried about being sued or insurance implications. And it was really sad because even the data from that, which has been reviewed multiple times from several different sources since then, showed that the risk was so slight that most of the women were better off continuing it because all of the tremendous benefits of having adequate estrogen, especially, number one. And almost all of those women were either on Prempro or Premarin, so horse urine estrogen or horse urine estrogen with synthetic progesterone, which is actually called progestins. And legally they can call progestins, synthetic progestins, they can call that progesterone. It is not. It is synthetic progestin. And that was the reason that there was a slightly increased risk of cancer from that synthetic progestin. Another term that comes up a lot is bioidentical hormones. Bioidentical, right? So anybody know what that means? It sounds like it means natural, or it literally means similar to your hormones in your body. And a lot of people, just a lot of doctors especially, just think it means estrogen and progesterone as opposed to just estrogen. But that is not what it means. But how do I know that? So a lot of people come in and say, oh yeah, I'm taking bioidentical hormones. Oh, so who tested you? Did you have serum testing or saliva? Oh no, they never did any testing. Well, how do you know what your body levels are if you don't test? So it's impossible to do bioidentical hormones if you're not testing that woman's hormones to know what bioidentical is for her, because it's different for everyone. So that confuses a lot of people. And bioidentical doesn't mean natural. Some doctors still prescribe synthetic progestins and horse urine estrogen, but if they do test to give you the right amount of those, and that isn't necessarily a terrible thing, except for the progestins, the risk caused by that. So the point is, a much better way is to do plant-based, truly natural estrogen and progesterone. And a lot of women who are diagnosed with menopausal women who are on hormone replacement therapy are taking really high doses based on blood testing. So I'm going to come back to that, but I just wanted to put all that out, kind of stuff to think about in the beginning. So hormones fluctuate a lot. This is a graph of serum estrogen levels. So estrogen measured in the blood every 10 minutes for 6 hours. You can see how it's going up and down and up and down and up and down. And so blood tests are the gold standard for most things, but there are important exceptions. Intestinal pathogens don't show up on a blood test. A stool test is much better for that. Chemical toxicities only show up in the blood when they're severe and recent. So long-term exposure to small amounts of chemicals, which we all have some exposure to, show up better in a urine test. Mold exposure, the concern isn't usually an acute infection of the lungs from the mold, but rather the waste products that the molds produce, and those can end up stored in your fat cells for long-term periods of time, just like chemical toxins. So the best test for that is also urine. Heavy metal toxicities can be tested, like uranium, cadmium, arsenic, lead, mercury. Those can be tested in urine and or hair, but also don't show up in the blood unless you've got a really severe exposure and relatively recent. So you can test for those things in the blood. If you have any significant amount in the blood, then that's really, really bad. And if you test in the blood and it's low or absent, that doesn't mean that you do not have a body burden of heavy metals. The only way to know for sure is to do a hair or a urine test. And then steroid hormones. So steroid hormones, like the estrogen graph I just showed you, go up and down, up and down, up and down a lot. So if you do a blood test, you're just getting a snapshot in time of a variable that's constantly going up and down. So you're not really seeing what the exposure is over time, most of the time, that's affecting someone's health. So saliva hormone testing, especially for when I say menopausal, I mean premenopausal, perimenopausal, during menopause, postmenopause. It's all the same testing. Anything to do with menopause, before, during, or after. It's much better for most women to do saliva hormone testing. Saliva hormone testing is much, the equipment used is 10 times more sensitive. And I included this picture here of this person's head. This is a real human body that has had a red plastic injected into the arteries of the head, and then they've used acid to remove all the rest of the tissue. So those are the actual structure of blood vessels. And notice how thick they are around the saliva glands. So the saliva glands have a very rich bed of capillaries around them. So anything that is in the bloodstream shows up in small amounts in saliva. And the benefit of that for steroid hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all three estrogens, is that you're not going to have that fluctuation up and down, up and down. You get an average throughout the day, number one, because it's slowly filtering in to produce saliva. And number two, the testing itself, we usually test cortisol at the same time. A lot of doctors only test cortisol, adrenal gland function, by testing one time first thing in the morning. And that's a useful test, but you really need to see your graph of, we're going to have some pictures of this in a second, the graph of your cortisol production, your adrenal function throughout the day. It's highest in the morning, it goes down a little bit in the midday, and lower in the evening, and lowest at night. And so when we do a saliva hormone test, you spit into 4 tubes, so we can see that 4 times of the day for cortisol, and then the lab combines a little bit from each of those 4 tubes, makes a 5th one to test estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, the steroid hormones. So blood tests are required to check the thyroid. You can't check thyroid hormone in saliva. Standard thyroid tests are always blood tests. And if a woman has difficulty getting pregnant, or menstrual cramps, some other relatively rare conditions, blood tests are required to test things like, in addition to estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, to test things like luteinizing hormone and FSH and pregnenolone and serum hormone binding globulin, which is a carrier molecule for most of the hormones. So the big thing, though, the big picture and if you have questions about other hormone related things apart from menopause, that's usually what most people want to hear about. Let me know. But yeah, the main thing with menopause is low estrogen, and everyone knows it causes hot flashes and mood swings and sometimes anxiety, but also, and most people know about dryness, night sweats, but can also cause insomnia and irritability and depression and anxiety. So here's an example of a patient that I did a saliva hormone test on. And you can see up here the colored graph. That black line is the 4 cortisol readings, or adrenal function readings, throughout the day. So 30 minutes after waking up, noon, evening, and night. And the green bar in the colored section is the normal range for cortisol. So that's where we'd like to see. So this woman has really depleted, very, very depleted adrenal function throughout the day. She's making a little bit still in the morning. And then those 4 dots that make up that black line are numerically represented here. So her morning cortisol was 9.1, range is 14 to 25. But in the middle of the day, it should be between 5 and 10, and hers was 0.44, less than 1. So, that's going to really cause a lot of fatigue if you're not making almost any cortisol at all. And then, the rest of the day was just almost non-existent. So cortisol is always highest first thing in the morning because it's what wakes you up. So have you ever had the experience where you open your eyes and you don't really feel like getting up, you don't feel like you're quite ready to get up yet, but then you do stand up and expose yourself to some light, and all of a sudden you're awake? That's what cortisol does. When you see light, and even to a certain extent, if you just get up out of bed and walk around a little bit, your body's going to know it's morning. It's going to pump out a hit of cortisol. That's why it's always highest in the morning, and that is a big part of what wakes you up. So the standard saliva test includes those 4 adrenal tests: DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone, which is a precursor for estrogen and testosterone. So a lot of people who are experiencing low estrogen or even low testosterone we find, because most doctors don't test DHEA, we find if they're low in DHEA, you can supplement that, and then your body will make more estrogen or more testosterone if you need it. If you don't need it, it won't. That's the beauty. So it's a well-regulated precursor that some people end up deficient in, and it is a really effective fix for a lot of people once you test for it and identify it. Dehydroepiandrosterone, DHEA. So There's also three estrogens. Estradiol is the one that you hear about the most. That's the standard one used in hormone replacement therapy. It is the dominant estrogen. But there is estrone as well, E1, and importantly, estriol. So estrone is just important to know about for certain conditions. Estradiol is the most important, but also estriol. So estriol has a much lower amounts prevalent in the bloodstream in circulation, but it is cancer protective. So it has the same functions as estradiol, but it actually reduces your risk of breast and many other cancers. Then progesterone, the ratio between progesterone and estradiol is really important, and testosterone. So another thing that's hopefully is known by most doctors now is something called estrogen dominance. So a lot of women used to, if they were on especially if they were on hormone replacement therapy and only estrogen, which was the case for many, many decades, then you get an imbalance between the amount of estrogen and progesterone. And that's a condition called estrogen dominance, and that causes a lot of problems. So having adequate progesterone to balance out the level of estradiol in your system is also really important. So this is a 58-year-old female. She was having overwhelming stress, fatigue, brain fog, and irritability. And I put her on some estriol and estradiol and progesterone and a few other supplements for general health. And 6 months later, her stress was tolerable and dramatically less fatigue at work. The brain fog was gone. She still found other people irritating, but I don't think that was entirely up to her hormones. And you can see, even on a really low dose of plant-based estrogen and progesterone, her levels actually went up a little bit too high. And that's why we retest, because we had to, pull it back. And so, yeah, that's one example of what can happen. So there's so many symptoms of low estrogen, and I think a lot of people aren't aware of all of them. So varicose veins, panic attacks, palpitations, UTIs, osteoporosis is a really important one, something to always consider if somebody's prone to osteoporosis and they're taking the nutrients they need, which are vitamin K2, vitamin D, bioavailable calcium, sometimes collagen. If somebody's doing all of those things and they have a recurrent DEXA scan or have a fall and have a fracture, if for any reason to suspect they're not building enough bone, then estrogen can be a factor as well. Strange dreams, memory lapses, weight gain, etc. So here's a 76-year-old female. A lot of times people come in and they say, "Oh, I've had breast cancer, and I was ER positive or PR positive." So those are tests they do for estrogen receptors. If a cancer has estrogen receptors on it, then they will restrict estrogen, so they don't want to have estrogen stimulating that cancer to grow. But if someone has low estrogen, so this is what happened with this woman. She had afternoon fatigue, low mental sharpness, allergies, night sweats, muscle loss, and low libido. Yes, lots of women are still sexually active in their 70s and beyond, and it was one of her main symptoms. So that she was concerned about. So as you can see here, her DHEA was really low, and her testosterone was really low, and her estrogen was fine, but at the low end of fine. So 0.5 to 3.2, hers was 0.1. So if we gave her a little, if I were, and I didn't, if I were to give her a little bit of low dose estrogen, it would bring it from low normal to mid normal, certainly not high. But all I did was give her DHEA and again, some other nutrients for general health. And so the DHE, if your body is low in testosterone, but your estrogen is fine, it will use the DHE to make testosterone. If your estrogen is low and your testosterone is fine, your body will use DHEA to make estrogen. It knows what to do with it. It's a standard precursor model that your body makes, but oftentimes as you get older, it can become deficient. So that's why we test it. There are some people that want to take DHEA just for longevity or general health because they know it makes testosterone. Men know that it makes testosterone. Some women know or are told that it makes estrogen. That's a bad idea. You don't want to take it unless you test to make sure that it's low. Because if you take too much of it, then you're going to end up with either too much estrogen or too much testosterone and not know it unless you test. So yeah, this woman, all of her major symptoms were much better, and it didn't affect her estrogen at all. So she doesn't have to worry about any increased, even slight, risk of getting breast cancer again. and she felt a whole lot better. No, no, her cortisol. Oh yeah, so she her cortisol was, yeah, I did. Oh, thank you for bringing that up. I didn't remember that part because that wasn't her major symptom. But yeah, so yeah, her estrogen or her cortisol was very low in the morning, and she's getting a bit of a boost in the evening, and that did contribute to her fatigue. I did give her some. The main thing when somebody has a situation like that is just to take glandular uh, adrenal glands from young, healthy mammals, usually pigs or cows. So vegans don't want to hear about that. But there's a whole system of glandulars for a lot of different disorders where you just take ground up glands from a healthy young mammal and it has everything you need in the cells of that tissue to enable your body to make more of the cells in the adrenals and that hormone. So yeah, I gave her some adrenal glandular, and it fixed her adrenals. And that's usually a short-term thing too. Once you get it back into the normal range, everything starts to work better, and most of the time you don't need to do that. Sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes a year, usually not longer than that for the adrenals. The hormones in a 76-year-old male, if she wants to maintain that optimum level, I usually recommend it continuing to test every year, depending on the situation, sometimes 6 months, because that doesn't just, that's never a one and done. There's so many things that affect it. It can go up and down. So for optimum benefit, symptom relief, it's a good idea to continue to test. So estrogen increases metabolism, prevents muscle damage, improves sleep, helps regulate body temperature, increases blood flow. It reduces your risk of heart disease by several effects, by decreasing arterial plaque and blood pressure and bad cholesterol. Most people know it helps maintain collagen in the skin, and it improves mood. So we talked about how it reduces risk of heart disease, but it decreases wrinkles, enhances energy, bone density. We talked about it increases the good cholesterol concentration, helps maintain memory, even decreases your risk of colon cancer. So who should get a saliva hormone test? Well, any woman who's unsatisfied with conventional hormone replacement therapy or worried about the side effects from it. Anyone with fatigue, depression, chronic inflammation that's unremitting from, even if they've tried other things and they're not getting the results they need, it's a good idea to check that. Heart health. If you have a family history of heart disease or memory loss or both, it's a very good idea to check that. And some women even have low testosterone, and you don't know unless you test. It's not very common, but it does happen. And then the big one, another big one is osteoporosis. So not every woman with osteoporosis has low estrogen, but if she's not having, the expectation in the medical profession is they do a DEXA scan. They usually don't start doing them until you're 70, sometimes not even until you're 80. But lots of women have decreased bone density in their 30s and 40s. Anybody who has a history of fractures that didn't have a severe trauma, that just fell and something broke, should have a DEXA scan. And because weight bearing exercise is the most important thing. But there was a study on teenage cheerleaders on the effects of drinking soda pop, sugar in the acid in Coca-Cola. And just one soda a day was enough to measurably decrease bone density in teenage girls. So they were getting the weight bearing exercise. So your body builds up your bone density in your teens and 20s, and around your 30s it peaks and then starts to taper off unless you continue to get the nutrients you need: calcium, vitamin D, and K2. Hardly anyone gets enough K2 in their diet. There's K1 in dark green leafy vegetables, but K2 really only comes, and the only place to get a lot of it is from a soy-based product called natto, the Japanese. One of the reasons they have lower incidences of heart disease is K2 also helps reverse and diminish hardening of the arteries, plaques forming in the arteries. And it comes from fermented soy product called natto. So natto, this fermented soy product, is where nattokinase comes from, which is an important systemic enzyme. It's really good for arthritis and for vascular inflammation. And it is also where the K2 form of vitamin K comes from. So a lot of people don't get enough of that in their diet. So it's a simple test. It's a cardboard kit. I have them right up here. You just take it home, spit in 4 little tubes, write down the time of each one, stick them in the freezer, and then the next day there's a FedEx bag that comes with it, prepaid, and you just send it in FedEx, and I usually get the results in a week to 10 days. And then we've got a lot of really useful information to find out whether or not you need any hormones support or not. Any questions?